Do You Do? The podcast that explores various occupations and industries and arms you with information about what that position entails and how someone gets that job. This show is for anyone who's ready for a career change or who's just entering the workforce. What will we discover today? Lean in and enjoy the show with your host, Chris.
Welcome to What Do You Do, the Career Podcast. This is our first episode. It is with a guy named Steven, who is a speech pathologist, and I found him on Reddit, of all places, and it's a very interesting episode. I recorded 5 episodes, and this one was great, so I decided to make this one episode 1. A little bit about the podcast. We will be going weekly with different people, different professions, and different occupations to see what do you do. If you know anybody that wants to be on the show, or if you're interested, please email me at whatdoyoudopodcast@gmail.com or visit our website, whatdoyoudopodcast.com. Before we go into the interview, here's a little quote I like. It says, "Life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you react to it," by Charles Swindoll. Anyways, on to the show. All right, I'm here with Steve. He is a speech pathologist. He hails from Hawaii. How about you go ahead, Steve, and give us a little introduction about you?
All right, yeah. So my name is Steve, and like you said, I'm a speech pathologist currently residing in Hawaii. And I think one of the first things I want to do is just kind of explain what a speech language pathologist is. So this comes from the American Speech Language Hearing Association, which is like our big professional organization. And a speech language pathologist, we work to prevent, assess, and diagnose and treat speech, language, social communication, cognitive communication, and swallowing disorders in children and adults. So there's definitely quite a bit of area that we cover. So first off, going over what speech disorders are, I mean, they kind of occur when a person has difficulty producing speech sounds correctly or fluently. Think of like stuttering maybe, or has problems with his or her voice or resonance. We also work with language disorders, especially with people, how they understand language or express language. And another big thing we do is social communication, where a person has trouble with the social use of verbal and nonverbal communication. This could also include children and adults with autism spectrum disorders. We also work with cognitive communication disorders, such as adults with a TBI or a result of a stroke. And then finally, swallowing disorders, also known as dysphagia, which are feeding and swallowing difficulties, which may occur as a result of an illness, surgery, stroke, or injury. So yeah, that's just broadly what we do.
What influenced you most to become a speech pathologist?
So there was a period of time where, believe it or not, I was living in Shanghai, China, and I was working for a writer for this publication. It was like a family lifestyle magazine, and at that point, I really thought I was just going to be a writer, and everything would be great. But every day I went to the office, I just really hated the publishing industry and like the way it treats people, and I just could not see myself sustaining there. And then, one thing it's very easy for an American to do in China is to teach English. So I picked up this, English teaching gig, but it wasn't really teaching like vocab or grammar. It was just really teaching like how to sound more American, like teaching the American accent. And man, I just loved going to work every day doing that. And I'm like, man, this is like my dream job. Like, how can I make this how can I do this every day? And speech language pathology is like, one thing I thought was like, close enough to that. And then, after I figured out what it was, I Googled for 4 days straight and decided, man, I'm just gonna be a speech language pathologist. Like this is my direction in life.
How, as far as when it comes to the education, what track did you have to go? I mean, if you're used to being a writer, it seems like it might have been, kind of like a 180 turnaround, head back to the education trail. Was there education you had to do, or like certifications with accreditation, or how did you find the education track?
Yeah, so that's kind of like the more of the pain, kind of getting into this field. So I had an undergraduate degree, double majored in English and history. And then, that's when I decided I want to be a speech language pathologist. So then I had to do 1 year of just prerequisite classes into communication disorders. And then from there, I got like formally accepted into a master's program where I was able to get my master's of science in communication disorders. So all in all, it took me about 7 years worth of higher education. But I think there are some programs where you can get that done, between 5 and 6 years.
That's pretty amazing because that's almost borderline, medical school or law.
Uh, you know, I get that a lot. Like, I put in as much like higher education as a lawyer does, but clearly not a lawyer. But I'm also like way happy with that decision. I think all the education was totally worth it because, it seems like I have such a small job, but it's really just so much information. And I don't think that was enough time to really learn everything, to be honest. I mean, in the 2 years of the master's program, there was just so much information. Uh, it really could have been like a longer program.
Yeah, I remember when I was a child, I could not say the letter R.
Mhm.
And for the life of me, it seemed like any of the speech therapists that I saw were female.
Yeah.
But you're a man.
Yeah, yeah, no, I'm definitely the unicorn. I remember in my graduate class, I went into this first day not knowing that there was a big gender divide. I walk into the class and it's just like 40 women and then me. I'm like, what am I in the wrong class? Like this cannot possibly be. But yeah, no, that's how it is. Like I was definitely the unicorn.
What's the one most appealing thing that you find being a speech pathologist?
The best thing about being a speech pathologist, I think it's the people that I work with, because like, it really is such a range of people I can work with from literally age 0 to almost like age 100 and plus. Like I could work with just about anyone with a communication or swallowing disorder. That's what I love most about it. It really comes down to flexibility. I could work in a school setting, I could work in a hospital, a skilled nursing facility, outpatient. I feel like there's just so many opportunities, and that's not even like getting into private practice.
So can you like start your own speech clinic or do you freelance? What would is when someone comes in the field, what's the way they usually start? Would they start like under someone else learning, kind of, shadow them for a little while? Or is it just kind of right off the bat, here you go, start, maybe find your specialty. If you want to be with children more or autism or elderly, is it kind of you just pick what you want to do?
Yeah, exactly. With this field, it's definitely like a choose your own adventure novel. So after you graduate, you have to go through this almost like a probationary period. It's called your clinical fellowship, and after that, like works out to be like around 9 months. And then after that, you get your certificate of clinical competence through the American Speech Language Hearing Association. And at that point, you're kind of like a free agent and you just kind of like write your own ticket. So, you could absolutely, like, there's nothing stopping you from opening up your own, like, private practice or clinic or whatever. But like I said before, there's just so much to know and like so much experience that you need to have, I think, before you do that, that it's probably best to work under someone and really figure out like where you want to specialize. One thing that I always told myself that I would love to specialize in eventually is accent modification or accent reduction, and to do that in a private practice setting. But looking at it now, that probably won't be for another few years down the line.
Yeah, I mean, I would assume like in the film and TV industry, that would be a hot job because a lot of actors and actresses would be from England
Yeah, yeah.
and they would do a show and you can't really tell they're from England because they use an American, they lose their accent, I guess you could say, for the role. Myself, I'm from West Virginia,
Hmm.
and the outside the city there's a lot of a southern twang to the voice.
Oh, yeah.
So people will usually say, "You're from West Virginia." I'm like, "Yeah, I don't hear it in your voice."
Uh,
um,
that's one thing, and I think we do need these little accents within the country. I think it makes America much more interesting. But I think accent modification, I think more in a corporate setting is much much more useful. Let's say that there's this really brilliant math professor from China, and he speaks like pretty good English, or he has a pretty good grasp of it, but like he just doesn't come off efficiently or effectively when he's giving a lecture. So accent modification or accent reduction can help him, be more widely understood by his students. And it's like really like one thing that I would really love to do is help individuals with that kind of communication disorder.
What did your family and friends think when you're going from, writer publishing to speech pathology? Were they pretty supportive? Like, I mean, if you're in China and then here you are, you do this and you go to Hawaii, I mean, that's like a lifestyle change right there through your education and then moving. Were they pretty supportive about that, or
You know,
you get talked to?
Oh, absolutely. I'm very blessed in my life that my family and my friends have definitely supported me. I think when I first told people that this is what I want to do, they're like, "Okay, Steve, all right, you and your get rich quick schemes." But no, like everyone was like super supportive once they saw me, applying for grad school and then going through like the difficulty that is grad school. It's not the easiest time in the world. So I'm definitely blessed with good family and friends. No one like really criticized me on my decision, which I'm super thankful for. And man, it's been great.
Especially the move from China to Hawaii is a pretty big one. Especially, I mean, now there in Hawaii, do the children have accents, or would you say there's a more of a calling in a place like Hawaii or Puerto Rico or maybe Alaska, where there's some regional accents?
So kind of what I'm doing right now is like I'm not really doing accent modification or reduction. I'm actually working in a school setting. But in terms of like local accents, or I'd call it more of a dialect. There's like what's known as pidgin, which is like
Hmm.
a really like local way of speaking English, and it's super interesting. Um, but I mean, that's not one thing I really target like on a day-to-day basis, and something like I probably wouldn't want to do because, like I said before, I think accents, like in the U.S., make it much more interesting, make it a much more rich tapestry. I'm more worried about people like communicating more effectively.
Right. So, for example, you might, generically see children like me as a kid that would have a problem saying R
Right.
to help them overcome that. Um, and that's the one thing I remember most about elementary school is my speech therapy,
Oh yeah.
because it was just nonstop letter R, letter R. How
Yep.
do you say it? But making it fun for a kid to be able to grasp on, to learning how to do this when I think I'm doing it right, but you're telling me I'm not.
Yeah. Well,
And
yeah. Oh man. Like
that's what I remember. It was me saying I'm saying it right because in my head I think I'm saying it right, and you're saying no, I'm not, and you're conflicting, and it drove me mad. And I remember when I first started, it was hard, but then once the older I got, wait, they're trying to help me. I
yeah,
am
yeah.
saying it wrong. Um, and so it's things like that. And I guess if you don't use speech pathology at all, or you don't know someone that has, it's one of those jobs that kind of flies kind of low to the ground. Um, and I wish more people could, learn how to embrace it and use it. Um,
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think this definitely is, like you said, like, one of those like, fly under the radar kind of professions. I myself, like when I meet new people, like I'm always kind of explaining what I do. I'd say like a couple times a week I have to explain what I do, and people generally are pretty fascinated with what I do. And one thing that I always bring up is the movie The King's Speech, right? Where he
mhm.
helps, at that point, the new King of England with his severe stuttering, to produce this magnificent, beautiful speech at the end. I mean, that's one example of one thing that I could be doing. Um, Bruce Willis, the famous actor.
Right.
He's a terrible
Yes.
stutterer, terrible. Um, and I know for a fact he went to speech therapy for many years, and that's why in movies you never see him with like really long lines, or even when he did a monologue on Saturday Night Live a few years ago, you could like definitely see him like have those kind of like stuttering moments, but then he just kind of like has a more
Was
fluent
able to
moment, and you can
overcome.
barely tell that he stutters. Yeah, and it's to me that's absolutely beautiful.
That's like when the brain kicks in and you can remember how to overcome. I guess so. He
Yeah.
would go back to what he's learned. Let's slow it down a little bit because I know if I talk real fast, I'm a natural. I talk super fast.
Mm-hmm.
So constantly in my mind, I have to keep, slow it down, Chris. Keep it slow. Otherwise, I'm just blabbering and blabbering, and then you can't understand me. And it sounds worse than, any accent or dialect that I could think of. It's just a garbled, nonsense.
Oh yeah, when you have, like when you like slush your words together. But I think
Exactly. It just all runs
like most
together.
people,
And
yep.
so we've talked about a lot of the positives. And is there anything that you could think of that might just be like the one thing that slows you down if you go into work like, man, I have to do this today? Or
So
is that like pretty positive all around?
I think with like any job, there's some drawbacks, and I think usually it's sometimes the people. So because I work in a school setting, and I try to help kids as much as I possibly can, and I have to meet with the parents of these children, and sometimes that's like way easier said than done, and sometimes they can get a little contentious at times, and
Right.
especially when you work on individualized education plans or IEPs, those meetings can sometimes get a little rough. But I think one of the big things about being a speech pathologist is that you're a team player. You're working with the occupational therapists. You're working with the social workers. You're working with principals and teachers. You're working with everyone in the school, at least like in a school setting, anyways. Um, so you really have to like learn to like trust the other person that they're going to get like their end of the paperwork done. And I think that's really great. Like it can be a negative if someone doesn't like pick up like their end of the deal, and you kind of have to work around that. But I mean, other than that, like it's a very manageable job, and it can be very, very, very rewarding at the same time.
I think it's very rewarding because you're helping people overcome obstacles in their speech
Mm-hmm.
that I know, back to when I was saying I couldn't say R, I'd get frustrated because people are saying, what'd you say?
Yep. Yep.
So when you're able to communicate effectively, that's a whole level of stress that just goes away. Because you get worked up sometimes. I remember getting worked up, and
Mm-hmm.
now that I can say R, it's the level of stress is just gone.
Oh yeah.
So I think. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, absolutely. I mean, I could definitely relate to that. I think a lot of people. I'm not sure if everyone can relate to not being like understood. But just imagine being in a foreign country and you're trying your hardest to speak the language, the local language, and you just can't get it. Like the frustration that overcomes you when you're just trying to order like just some basic food and you just can't get your point across. That's very frustrating, and I think something that a lot of people can relate to. But something we don't necessarily think about, and maybe we take for granted, especially now. Like, oh, I could just send you a text message of what needs to happen later versus like calling someone. And if you have a problem with you saying the letter R, like that can definitely be a hindrance. Definitely be a
Right.
hindrance.
So if do you have any resources that you can think off your head where someone that wants to go into speech pathology, um, like the accreditation groups or anything, do you have any accreditation groups names you could drop that they could look up online or learning resources that they could go take a peek at?
Oh, absolutely. I think the first step is to go to asha.org, asha.org. That's the American Speech Language Hearing Association, and that's like the accreditation it, for like all speech language pathologists and audiologists. So that should be like your first step if you're kind of interested in like what a speech pathologist does and looking at education requirements, like a little bit more specifically. And then from there, I would recommend going to the subreddit SLP, short for speech language pathologist, just our SLP. That also like gives you like some of the topics that people are talking about within the field. And then once you're serious about going to grad school, or if you have any questions about grad school, there's a new subreddit called r SLP grad school, where you can figure out like what your chances of getting into grad school are, if you have any questions, or what might help your chances. So
And for those not aware, that's reddit.com/r/ then the names he's provided. So it'd be SLP,
yep.
SLP grad school.
Yep.
Okay, so that's the whole URL to find out on Reddit.
Yeah, absolutely. And if anyone has like more specific questions for me, please email into the show, and I'm assuming Chris will forward the emails to me and I'll get back to you.
Very much so. We'd be glad to do that. And I think it's a very good career choice. And it's definitely, to me, it sounds like a very in-demand career choice because you're always going to have the problems that you're facing every day. They're always going to be there. And I don't see it going away anytime soon. And again, it'll be very rewarding, I think, as a job for someone.
Oh, absolutely. And, they say right now that the demand is only going to go up and up, especially as enrollment in elementary and middle schools go up. So they're going to need more speech language pathologists to fill those roles. So if anyone is like remotely interested, I really highly suggest just checking it out. Just a quick Google search,
That's the way it is now.
Very in demand right now. Very in demand. I get like 2 to 3 calls, I'd say like every other week, just about job opportunities. So definitely something to consider.
That's very good to know because when I'm in the IT field myself, so there's so many IT jobs, but it's so saturated. So you're fighting neck and neck. So when they're calling you to offer you jobs, that's a very good sign.
Yeah, it's almost like unheard of now in today's economy.
Yeah. Well, Steve, I really appreciate it. If we hear from anyone, I'll be sure to forward it on to you. But we really appreciate it for taking some time and speaking with us today.
No, Chris, thank you so much for this opportunity. It's been great. Thank you.
Thanks for listening in today, and be sure to subscribe to the show so you don't miss that one episode that can change your career path. We're passionate about sharing all the possibilities of occupations out there, and we'd like to keep moving full steam ahead. Consider becoming a patron of the show and go to patreon.com/whatdoyoudopodcast to see how you can support the show.